started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this year's first virtual Lunch and Learn session, part of the Career Guides Mentor Program within the Wake Forest Investment Women Initiative. I'm your hostess, Julia Groom, the Wake Investment Women Program Coordinator, and I'm so happy to have this opportunity to introduce Dr. Ashton, who is also part of Wake Investment Women. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Ashton, and then we will ask our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will get started with our wonderful panel of questions and answers that you submitted. Of course, we don't have all the time to answer all the questions, but we will get to those answers later on that are not covered today, and I'll send it out in a document called a Frequently Asked Questions. This session is being recorded, so you can view it later. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ashton to give you another welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. As Julia said, I'm the director of Wake Invest in Women. We are so excited to be able to offer this virtual lunch and learn with y'all, an opportunity to be able to pick the brains of IT talent recruiters, ask them questions. You submitted so many excellent questions in advance. And so, as Julia mentioned, they're going to answer as many as possible. And ones that they can't get to, we will follow up with them to after the fact to get answers, and we will share that out with everybody. So thank you all again. And Julia, if you want to take it over to hand it off to the panelists.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashton. We're going to kick it off with Tanya Edmonds. She's going to be our panel moderator. If you can introduce yourself, and then also the panelists will introduce themselves, and then you can start the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Dr. Ashton. My name is Tanya Edmonds. I am Vice President of Talent Acquisition for RTI, or Research Triangle Institute, and we are an independent nonprofit research institute dedicated to improving the human condition. And I'll turn it over to Frida.
Thanks, Tanya. Hi, everyone. My name is Frida Green, and I also am with RTI International as a Senior Global Talent Acquisition Partner. Looking forward to our discussion today. I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Yep. Hey there. My name is Brian Jones. I'm the Director of Marketing at CAI Technology. We offer technical support for businesses and software development. And who's the lucky person next? I guess I can't see everybody. So
Ellen.
All right.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Brian. I'm Ellen Furby, Ellen Daney as well on LinkedIn if you're looking for me there. I am a talent acquisition manager with Wolfspeed. We are a semiconductor manufacturing company specializing in silicon carbide for applications in renewable energy and electric vehicles and things like that. I'm really happy to be here today.
All right. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. The way that things will flow this afternoon, we'll spend 30 minutes in which I'll ask questions of each of the panelists, and then we will allow time or leave time to for Q&A. We do have some questions in which we received in advance. We'll try to get through as many of those as possible, and those that we can't get through, we will submit answers to Julia so that you have those. And so we'll get started with the first question. The first question, how did you get your start in recruiting? And what is the favorite part of your job? And I'm going to start with Frida.
Thanks, Tanya. Thanks for that question. So I did not have, I guess, a traditional pathway. It was pretty circuitous. I started out, my undergraduate degree is in biology and chemistry. So I taught for a few years at the middle school level, science classes, but I really wanted to get into the pharmaceutical industry. And so I kind of did a pivot. But instead of pharmaceutical sales, which was my ultimate goal at the time, I ended up in a recruiting capacity for a staffing firm that specialized in pharmaceutical recruiting. One of my favorite parts of my job is really being able to help people with their livelihood. So I have a box full of handwritten notes from people that over the years, and I've been doing this for 20 years at this point, but I have handwritten notes of people thanking me for, helping them to get the job that they wanted, their dream job. So I think that's really one of the biggest parts of satisfaction of my job.
Thank you, Frida. And we've worked together for the past 2 years, and I did not know that you taught previously. So I learned something new about you.
Very
today.
short, very short.
All right, Ellen, what about you? How did you get your start in recruiting, and what is your favorite part of the job?
Yeah, very similar. I did sort of fall into this career. My undergraduate degree is in political science. I very much knew that I was going to get my PhD and be a professor. That was, for sure the thing. Got a couple years into grad school, decided that was not what I wanted to do pretty quickly. So admire you, Dr. Ashton. But I started with a staffing agency just to see what the corporate world was like. That went well. I enjoyed it. And then moved into, in-house sort of corporate recruiting roles from there. And I've been with WillSpeed now for the last few years. And I think, very similar. One of the my favorite parts of my job is connecting people with opportunities and then seeing them grow, right? Like within the organization. It's really satisfying whenever you are able to help, get someone connected with the right opportunity. And then 2 years from now, you see them thriving in their, in their role, and that you played a small part in that. And so that's a really satisfying part of the role.
Thank you, Ellen. And very similar to me, I love the fact that, we're helping people, and to see how people, or those candidates that we've been a part of, to see their growth in terms of their careers and their success. And much like you, I got my start. My background was humanities and social sciences, sociology, and got my start in the staffing agency world as well. And here I am in the corporate recruitment space. All right. The next question, Ellen, we'll start this one with you this time. What types of certifications or credentials do you look for when recruiting for IT positions?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that, there's obviously varies depending on the role, but outside of, education credentials and that sort of thing, when we're looking at networking and systems, type of roles, CCNAs, CompTIA certifications are something that, we love to see, on the security side, certified ethical hacker certifications are good for our business in particular. And then just, the programming languages, right? So specifically, again, depending on what role and what we're looking for there, but, Java and Python are big ones for us, kind of across the board, and then having some of that, platform experience in Linux and is also a big thing for most of our IT roles across the board. So those are some of the, I would say, hard, credentials and things that we sometimes look for. If that answers the question.
Thank you. And sounds like it was very much role specific, depending on
for that. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Brian, what about you?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. I'm sort of a bottom line person. And so we're looking for certifications that match the job posting. I mean, it's really straightforward. There's sort of a common phrase of, best fit. And while I think that's pretty true maybe in corporate culture issues, for IT jobs, having the correct certification it's prima facie evidence that you can walk in and you can do the job. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
All right, Brian, we'll start this next question with you. In
Okay.
addition to technical skills, what are the most important soft skills that you look for in candidates?
Certainly. And thank you again. Teamwork and likability. You're going to have to work in teams, almost guaranteed. And if in the interview process, your interviewer is a human being, and if they can't sort of imagine themselves working with you in a positive and productive way, chances are that might not be back to the good fit. So likability is really important, and making sure you can demonstrate or have a few anecdotes about teamwork and how you've worked with others, and maybe even subjugated your own ambitions, so to speak, for the good of the team.
Okay. So it sounds like candidates need to come in prepared with specific examples around teamwork.
And be friendly and likable and upbeat and positive. And this, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Frida.
So
What about
I
you?
do think teamwork is important, but I'll add to that problem solving. So really that ability to think critically and solve problems, I think that's highly valued. Really being able to, analyze situations and make sound decisions. I think that's really, really important. And I'll say communication as well, strong communication skills, really being able to articulate and express your ideas and collaborate with others. Those are the two that I'd add.
Okay, thank you. And I think Frida, you and I both know there's a lot of collaboration that happens at RTI. The collaboration is absolutely key for us.
Absolutely.
All right. The next question, I will start with you, Frida. How can a candidate best position themselves to stand out from other applicants and get an interview?
It's a great question, Tanya. I think really developing your unique personal brand or your unique proposition, brand proposition, really identifying your strengths, the value, and the unique qualities that you can add to an organization. I think those are key for you to really identify and be able to speak effectively about those components of yourself. I think that's a really important thing that can differentiate you from others. And then I'll add to that as well, like really demonstrating your passion and enthusiasm for the industry or that company that you are trying to get a job within. That's another really big piece. I'm really showing that there's, it goes beyond just the job or the salary, but you're really interested in what they do. And we at RTI are mission driven. So that's really, really important to us.
All right. And I think that ties back to the communication piece, that you have this passion, you have this enthusiasm, but you have to be able to articulate that in the interview.
Right.
All right. Ellen, what about you? How can a candidate best position themselves to stand out from other applicants and get an interview?
Yeah, very good question. I think one thing building off of what Frida said, is be intentional about the roles that you apply for, right? So, I would, it target, right? Companies target specific roles, be focused in your search, and, tailor your resume when possible to the organization or the role that you're applying for, to highlight, whatever skills they're specifically looking for. And then also, having, an idea and a passion about the industry that you're, and the companies that you're targeting. I think that's a much better approach and better way to get, to the interview process than sort of mass, applying, which can be a little confusing for folks. So that's what I would say, is just be intentional and targeted in your search.
And I agree with you on that, Ellen, in terms of the tailored resumes. I often suggest maybe have a resume for each type of position in which you're interested in applying, so that what you're submitting is in line with the requirements and the job specifications. So thank you for that.
Tanya, could I jump in real quick? Just a question kind of related to this for the recruiters. What cover letters, are those something that your organizations want? Do you ask for them anymore, or is it much more focused on the resume itself? I know that was not what the question you had prepared for, and I apologize. It jumped into my head.
No, it's totally fine. I don't know who wants to start with answering that question.
I can take a first try at that one. So at RTI, we don't necessarily focus as much on the cover letters. And I found that other organizations that I've worked for, they've kind of gotten away from the cover letter. Where it's important is if the job really does entail a lot of detailed writing. Sometimes they want a writing sample. And so sometimes that's added into the job description as, one of the things that you would need to submit. But it's less important now from my perspective. Other companies may view that differently.
I would agree there as well. I think it's similar with us. We don't require, that you submit a cover letter. Folks do, sometimes, and I'll say where, where I pay more attention to those and really look at that is where there is maybe a difference between, the role and the applicant's resume. If it's not an exact match, maybe there's a story there. And if that's told in the cover letter, if it's tailored to why they want to work at Wolfspeed and, whether it's a career change or whatever, that might kind of give someone an extra little edge there. But I do think in general, companies are moving away from that being a big part of the consideration process.
Brian, did you want to?
Sure. For the cover letters, I think it's an opportunity. I know a lot of folks are moving away, but if you can craft your cover letter into being sort of a functional resume, you've got your typical standard resume with your dates and your timeframes and your job responsibilities. But if you can craft your cover letter into a more flowing, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just a way to sort of describe yourself and how you've dealt with some certain situations, and even showcasing, again, I think Frida brought this up, your problem solving abilities. I think I don't know. I think it's it's something I would always recommend, and people always read them. And if it's a really good one, all of a sudden you're looked at differently. So I know you've got to get past the gatekeepers in a lot of these situations, and that's difficult, but I'm a proponent of the cover letter.
Okay. Interesting thoughts. And I'll just say that I always suggest it can't hurt, it can help. But I think, just thinking about RTI, we typically focus on the resume, and it's not cover letter is not a requirement. And when looking at education and experience, we focus more so on the resume versus a cover letter, but we don't require it. And like I said, it can't hurt. It can only help.
Tanya, have there ever been instances when a cover letter kind of worked against the candidate?
No, I can't think of one. And I'm thinking, outside of RTI, I can't think of a time where it worked against the candidate. In situations or instances where candidates did include a cover letter, it kind of explained maybe some gaps in employment or added color, if you will, or flavor to the resume. But I can't think of an instance where a cover letter worked against a candidate.
Okay.
In my experience, I haven't.
Hey, I'm sorry to jump in, but I would actually look on the back end and say that follow-up is something that a lot of candidates don't do, and they should really do that. I'm not saying in lieu of the cover letter, but it's something that this generation may not like personal communication, but I think follow-up is critical. I defer to the panel.
Agreed.
Diana, are you thinking of thank you letters after the fact? Is that what you're referencing?
Not even just a thank you letter, but like reinforcing during my interview, I shared that I was very interested in this particular industry, and I think I have these skills too. So it's kind of like a post cover letter, but something that really follows up to get you on, the target list.
Diana, I'll chime in. I agree with that. I think I put more emphasis on something like that, like a follow-up email. It could really set you apart from, if there's a really close tie there between candidates, it could possibly put you over the edge there. So I think it's always a nice touch. So whenever I'm coaching individuals through their interview process, I always, encourage them to do at least a quick thank you note, maybe emphasizing, like you said, their value proposition in that note. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree as well.
Appreciate this. Sorry, go ahead, Tanya.
I was going to say, I agree with that as well. I guess back in my day, it was a handwritten note, but everything has gone electronic to email now. So, and I do look forward to receiving those emails. It is very much welcomed. I agree with Frida. It can set you apart if it's a close tie at the end of the process. little email or that email, that note back can kind of set you apart.
I'll just add just quickly that I have literally seen that be, I mean, the difference between two candidates and getting, one person getting an offer, but the other is individualized, notes to the panel members that really can be a difference maker.
Fascinating.
Thanks, everyone. I'll let you get back to the prescribed questions now.
Yeah, no worries. The next question, I'm going to start with you, Ellen. What do you consider to be red flags for candidates?
Yeah, so this is, I think this is a tricky question. It's a good one, but it's tricky because I think most things that, traditional recruiters would see as, red flags are often things that that can actually be strengths, right? Gaps in resumes. What in your resume, what is that? What were you doing then? So I just think it's could be a tricky question. But things I will say is, when it comes to conversations, when you get to that first stage, the way you interact with the recruiter, I mean, it matters. It shows how, you'll be able to interact with cross-functional teams. There's no role that you're going to have there. You're only going to be communicating with technical professionals, right? So, just I pay attention to the way, and managers do, the way candidates interact with the recruiter in that first, line, and being able to communicate something technical to someone maybe less technical is very important. So not being able to do that can sometimes make me wonder, okay, how in-depth is this knowledge really? Outside of that, I would just say from a resume perspective, long list of skills and technologies, but then not tied into any role or project or any, just lists of words, for keyword searches and things like that. I know people sometimes think that's the way to do it, but can sometimes throw a flag. Not that, we would talk to that person, but I would just say, if a skill's in your resume, try to show where you've used that either in school or, projects or work. So those are some things for me.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen. So that interaction and communication and that first connection. Okay, perfect. Brian, what about you? What do you consider to be red flags for candidates?
Thank you. And I will take the tack that Ellen did, that it's red flags is maybe a strong word, but one of the things that I know that I look for is a clear articulation of why the candidate is reaching for this job. It's sort of the phrase, either you're running from something or you're running to something. And I would much prefer to have people that this is something that they're aspiring to, that they're qualified, they can do it, but this makes a lot of sense in their timeline and sort of their pathway in their career. And in those lateral moves, they sometimes give me pause. If you have been doing sort of the same position or skill set, granted, if you're a professional and that's the case, that's the case. But if it's a situation where there is sort of more of a vertical typical path and someone seems to have been in a position once or twice or maybe even 3 times where they're sort of at that same level, it just makes me ask the question, why? What's preventing that person maybe from taking that next step?
Okay. Got it. A good answer. And, my question, I guess, kind of back to you, Brian, in terms of you've seen this lateral movement on their resume. Do you use that as an opportunity to ask, why? Or getting the background information, particularly with, companies downsize. Sometimes the movement is involuntary, and there's a story behind that.
Yeah, always. It's if it's something that I have a question about, it's certainly something I'm going to articulate.
Right. So my advice, based on that response, is if there is movement in your background and resume, ensure that you have a good reason or good story, or be able to articulate why you have that movement, or maybe why you've had 2 or 3 lateral moves on your resume. And I would just like to add one red flag, and it's during the interview process. I don't know, maybe more of a pet peeve, but I always like for candidates or applicants or interviewees to ask questions. And for me, we get to the end of the interview and we ask, do you have any questions? And there are none. It's a red flag, particularly if you tell me you're passionate about this company or passionate about this role and you have no questions, you haven't done the research. That's usually a red flag for me.
100% agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Same here. Call me. I always say, call me old fashioned, but I want some questions at the end there. So, yeah, I agree with that. Thanks.
All right. So we have 2 questions left for the panelists. The next one: what recommendations do you have for someone who wants to transition into IT as a second career? And Brian, we'll start with you, and then you, Frida.
A lot of times those second careers can be something that maybe life got in the way of your career. If for women, if there's been raising a family and then you're stepping back into, it's going to be just something positive, and that's believe in yourself. If you can't walk into the interview and believe that you're the right candidate for the job, it's going to be much harder for the person who's interviewing you to come away with that same feeling, sort of that self-confidence. And if I can interject one more little thing, different versions of your resume. Please have customized resumes for each and every position that you're applying for. And almost all of these will be digital. So organize them. Don't make your reader work to find the skills that they've asked for, and use a little color. I mean, it doesn't have to be a circus, but maybe some navy blue headings or something like that help your reader get through the document. I find that to be, if the person has put that much thought into making a really legible and readable resume, that's a really nice sign.
Thank you, Brian. I agree with that in not making the reader work.
Yep.
Oftentimes we receive a lot of resumes, and those that kind of stand out are those that are, more readable and you can kind of grasp the skill set and experience that we're looking for. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Frida, what about you? What recommendations do you have?
Sure. So I'm going to add on to Brian's with the resume. I definitely think you need a tailored resume, but you also want to highlight those transferable skills. I think that's key when you're trying to make that leap or that transition. Another piece that I'll add to that, 2 more pieces. I think this is where you can really leverage your network and even mentorship. You really want to connect with folks that are already in the industry that you're interested in. Events like this one where, you can network with recruiters here, different networking events, online communities, LinkedIn. You really want to leverage those platforms as you're trying to, transition. And then I'll also say this, I know a lot of people are maybe getting back into the workforce, or just, it's just a transition. They want to transition into the IT space, but be a little bit flexible and open to even entry-level roles, because that could get your foot in the door. And if you have previous experience, you will probably get in there, learn quickly, and move up very quickly. So don't be afraid of taking a step back to take a few steps forward. So I'll leave it with that.
I have a question. I'm like Casey, sorry. What is it now? How long does it take for you to look at a resume? What's the standard time frame? Yeah, I always love to see the answers for that.
So I can jump in, Julia. Starting out in the staffing world to now, recruiters, I learned how to really hone in for keywords. So recruiters, we don't read resumes typically from beginning to end like you would read a book. We are looking for keywords. And that's kind of like the initial screening process where we're trying to get through, in many cases, hundreds of resumes. Mm-hmm. And then once we kind of narrow those down, we may go back with a more thorough eye, but it's a really quick thing. So you want to have that goes back to that point of having your resume tailored and really customized and kind of highlight those key things in your resume.
Thank you. And I see Diana has a question.
I do. So I mentor students both at Wake Tech and at other schools. So you can change your resume, but you can't change your LinkedIn profile to customize to the job that you're going through. So what recommendations do y'all have for students who are looking in different areas, and then how do they manage their LinkedIn profile?
I can speak to that a little bit. I think that, LinkedIn profile is a really good place for, that initial, to get an outreach, from a recruiter. In terms of your applying on LinkedIn, you can have multiple resumes within your LinkedIn profile. So when you go to apply, you can check there. But in terms of being noticed or getting, reached out to for the correct roles, by recruiters proactively, I would just say, highlighting on there what you want, what types of roles you're looking for. There is an option for you to do that on your LinkedIn job profile. And, again, just kind of highlighting the main skills that you're targeting. But then again, storing, you can store multiple resumes in your LinkedIn job applicant account. So those are some things that I would think of there.
And I agree
Tanya,
with
we
you.
have some questions in the chat. Do you want to hold off, or do you want to wait until the chat session?
We have one more question, and then we can move into other questions. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And I just wanted to add, Frida, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the entry-level position if you're trying to transition into IT. And I just wanted to add, I would also include any volunteer experience, like if you volunteered in a technical capacity or IT capacity, to add that to your resume, because it may not have been paid work, but it was in volunteer, but it is experience that you can leverage in your job search.
Even internships.
Yes, absolutely. Internships. All right. The last question, I'm going to ask all panelists to respond. What is one piece of advice you can share with our participants on how to get their applications noticed in a competitive market? And I think we've hit on some of this already, but any last words or parting words of advice?
Be strategic. Be strategic with the jobs that you're applying for, that they really match what your demonstrable skill set and experience is.
I would say, definitely that. And also, include your hobbies. If you don't have, a ton of technical experience, but you do technical projects for fun. I mean, that's something that, that recruiters and hiring managers love to see, right? So if you taught yourself how to script in Python and made a cool app, put that on your resume, and highlight those things. Don't be afraid to. Those are cool and good additions to resumes if it's if there's less IT experience, work experience there.
What a great comment.
And I'll just add the last comment, which we've already touched on. I think really tailoring your resume, I think that's important. So make sure you're tailoring it, highlighting your transferable skills. I think those are things that can really, help you stand out.
All right. Well, thank you. As you've heard, Brian, be strategic. Ellen, include hobbies. And Frida, tailoring your resume and highlighting your skill set. So thank you for answering those questions. And
yes,
Dr.
And Tanya, what I'll do just for now, because what you just were summing up off of Frida's last comment, we've gotten a couple of different questions. One was, do you suggest highlighting keywords on your resume, maybe in bold? Is that something that you would appreciate as a recruiter, or would that be a red flag?
I don't think it's a red flag. You could definitely do that, but be cognizant of your formatting, because what happens, a lot of these applicant tracking systems that we use, they do, some of them are very sophisticated and they can source via keywords. So you do want to put your keywords in there for sure.
And then actually somebody else asked a question, since you just mentioned the tracking software. She's read that many sources that there are apps or programs that review resumes and look for those keywords and phrases more so than a person reading resumes. How true is this?
I think it varies by company. Some companies do have very sophisticated systems that do read that and kind of source or rank applicants based on some of those keywords. So that's, that is something that you see more and more of. So I definitely think you should keep that in mind.
Okay. We also have a question. How do we get through a video interview process successfully?
Test the link before the interview. Test the link before the interview. That's my biggest piece of advice is that just it's okay if it shows that you popped up and started the meeting earlier. Test it, and just so you don't have that anxiety. That's just the biggest. Just test the link before your interview. That's my big piece there.
Casey,
I agree with that. Make sure everything audio is working, and absolutely test the link, as Ellen said.
Nori, I just want to double check, because I have a friend who had this experience where she had to pre-film like a screening video before ever having interaction with a recruiter. I don't know if that is what Nori was maybe also asking, but I would throw that out there. Yes, for SAS. Okay. How do you recommend kind of working through that if you've never been asked to do that before?
So I've used similar software at a previous organization. And the particular platform that I was using, it would allow the individual to do kind of like a test run. And you had multiple times, you had a few times that you could take the clip of you answering the question. So that was one particular software that I've used in the past. I can't say that all of them will allow you to do that, but you can always do that the old school way of practicing your responses in the mirror, in the bathroom before you record. So that's one workaround.
And let's see, Tiffany has a question for LinkedIn. Do you put your previous work history or some of your experience? And then how do you go about finding the recruiters on LinkedIn?
So I think people will probably vary on their opinions on this. Mine, when it comes to LinkedIn, is, I think it should have your experience on there and be a shortened version of your full resume. I don't think there's a reason, necessarily need your full resume on there, but a highlight reel kind of is what that should look like. And then, when interacting with recruiters or reaching out, kind of cold reaching out to recruiters, this might just be a pet peeve on my end, but go on the website, look for a specific job that you're interested in. And, if someone comes to me with that, I'm much more likely to be able, to help them than if someone just sends me their resume and wants me to do the work, for them to try to find, right? So just put in a little bit of pre-work there before reaching out directly to recruiters, but go to the organizations that you're interested in on LinkedIn and look at the people that work there and that are in talent acquisition. And then again, be targeted in your outreach. That's my advice.
Thank you.
Speaking of resumes and tailoring them, and we do have a number of students at Wake Tech who are transitioning careers. How long should resumes be? I know back in the day, people said, "Oh, it should be a page." Now that seems overall they've gotten a bit longer. But when should things drop off of the resume, and kind of what should length look like? And Brian or maybe Tanya, do you want to field that one?
I don't actually have a preference. It's how well it's organized and how readable it is. If they've put some thought into it and you can tell that they're not making me work. Mm-hmm. If I have to get to the second page to get to what Ellen brought up, maybe an interesting hobby or something that is applicable, I don't know. I know a lot of people say that one page is the standard, but it doesn't bother me. Now, give me a 4-pager that is just, no, I'm being sincere. If give me a 4-pager that is way too in-depth and way too wordy, I'm going to look at this and go, this person's lacking some critical thinking here with respect to what they've presented to me.
Yeah, I'm aligned with Brian. I typically like to see 2 pages, and I think you can condense, just depending on where you are in your career. If IT is a second career for you and you have, let's say, 20 years of experience, I think you can, include your maybe last 10 years of work and then a space for previous experience and kind of summarize that to where it's 2 pages. Anything more than 2 pages, I still read it, but ideally for me, 2 pages is kind of what I like to see.
Great, thank you. And now I will actually return us to our list of questions that we were able to send you. I think we've already hit on how that it's important to optimize resumes for the job that you're applying for. Another question we got was, is it risky to request accommodations for an interview? The specific example was that they have an auditory processing disorder and can struggle responding quickly to verbal instructions. Is it risky to ask for accommodation to get instruction for from an employer in writing in event that there's maybe like a real code or a real-time code test? So I guess general question, is it risky for a candidate to ask for accommodations, or is that something that y'all are used to? And I guess I'll open the floor to anybody for that one.
I can take a first try at this one. I'm really requesting an accommodation for an interview. I don't think that it's inherently risky. It is a protected right under the law.
Mm-hmm.
So, you should be able to do that. Now, I will say that biases do creep in. I'm not going to try to say that doesn't happen, but you do have a right to ask for an accommodation. I would say, you need to really understand what your rights are, and then feel free to confidently, articulate that if you need that support going into an interview.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frida. And Dr. Ashton, one of the things you mentioned, was in the event of a real-time code test. And, I think that speaks to the recruiter that you're working with and the candidate experience. Any recruiter that you're working with should be able to set expectations on the front end. And if there is a code test expected, you should know that going into the interview. And that's how we operate at RTI. We set expectations on the front end in terms of what candidates can expect, whether it's 1 round, 2 rounds. We want it to be a good experience for each candidate.
Thank you. All righty. Let's see. Well, we've hit some of these. What questions do you recommend candidates ask recruiters?
Happy to take a first stab at this one. I think it's always a fair question to ask why the position is open, right? Is it growth? Is it a backfill? Did the person that was in the role previously get promoted? Awesome. Try to understand what that is if you can. Another question I like to hear, and I think recruiters should have an answer for, is, what are the first challenges or projects that this person would tackle in this role? It shows that you're thinking about yourself within the organization. And then, the recruiter is partially there to be your advocate throughout the process. So, you can be a little bit more, I think, frank. And what's the culture like? What's team structure? Questions that you might not feel as comfortable asking the hiring manager when you get to that stage. I think, you should feel comfortable asking. But if not, that's a good question for recruiters.
All right, I'm going by the general head nods from the panelists that y'all are in agreement.
Yeah, if I can add, if I might add one more, I'm if it's an internal recruiter, I might be asking, what's the strategic position? What's the company itself looking towards doing in the next few years? Is this going to be a growing company in a growth market, or is it consolidating and contracting? And because I think a lot of times, if you're new to the job market, you might not be able to ascertain that on your own, because that takes a little bit of experience maybe to be able to look and know. Okay, great. So I think like right now, Advance Auto would be a tough place maybe to be looking to get a job because they're going through lots and lots of layoffs. And sometimes those things are harder to find than others. But I would ask about the company's next prospects of the next few years and strategy and stuff like that. As a strategic marketing guy, that's sort of how my brain works.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Julia,
I'll just add one little thing. I like for candidates to ask a question that they can tie to something from the website. Maybe they read a press release, and I love to hear, oh, I saw on your website that you're planning to grow triple in size over the next 3 years, or you're planning to acquire this company, because that tells me that they have done their homework. They've been to our website. They've read some press release, or, they've done their due diligence prior to the interview. So I like when questions are tied back to something that they viewed or read on our company website.
Great. Thank you. Julia, you want to take over for a little bit of asking the questions? You're muted.
I'm talking away and not even anyone hear me. Let's try that again. Thank you.
I do it all the time. We have a couple
of questions that came through the chat. Rose wanted to know, how long should you wait after applying for a position and you haven't heard back from the company to follow up and check on the status of the application? Anyone?
Ellen? I know you have thoughts.
If it's just an application, if you've applied and you haven't heard back, I don't know, honestly, to be honest, because I don't know how you would know exactly who to even follow up with at that point, right? And so, maybe it is trying to find somebody, on LinkedIn. But I would say if you've had an initial conversation or a conversation or two and you have not, feedback, 24 to 48 hours is fine with me. In fact, I kind of like that, that go-getter kind of attitude, and it shows interest. But in terms of from application to hearing something, I don't have good advice there. Sorry, to be honest. Does anyone else, please?
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I agree with Ellen. When you just apply, it's kind of hard for you to have necessarily a contact within the organization until the recruiter reaches out to you. But like Ellen, I think once you've had some level of interaction with the recruiter, one of the other questions, going back to a previous question, what's something to ask a recruiter? Ask them about the timeline, because that'll help set your expectation. And then if they miss that, then that's your, if they're a day late from the timeline they gave you, then reach out. I would say reach out. But I'm like Ellen, I do like the go-getter. But I'd say ask that question, kind of timeline on when should I hear back from you, that kind of thing.
Excellent.
Awesome. Tanya or Brian, you want to add anything to that question?
No,
I agree with Frida and Ellen.
Agreed.
Well, awesome. We have another question in the chat. What kind of research? Hold on, let me see. What kind of research should you do about the company before you go to the interview? Do you just go to the company overview or page or about us?
I think as much research as possible. Certainly go to the website, the company page, try to have a general understanding of what the company does. Just depending on the company, you may go to a website and not really have a thorough understanding, but have a general understanding so you can speak to that. And also ensure that, you understand, you've read the job description, you've reviewed the job description, and you have a general understanding of what the role entails. But I would suggest doing whatever is available, doing as much research as possible to try to, have an understanding. And like I said, being able to tie a question or maybe a response back to the company.
Great. Anyone else like to add to that?
I'll just say really quickly, at a company like Wolfspeed, I definitely don't expect anyone to, that I talk to be a material scientist or research scientist, within IT, because it can be a little bit confusing. But what I'm looking for is that you've tried, right? Are you getting the word semiconductor out there? I'll give you the rest, right? But have you given a try. And that's all, at least at this company that I'm looking for, just general, and then to the other points, like looking at press releases and what's going on currently with the company.
Great.
And
Casey, go ahead.
and personally, if I know who I'm going to be speaking with, I always do a LinkedIn profile check. You never know. Maybe they went to the same school. Maybe that you have some common ground that can help you establish a quick, easy relationship.
Yeah, it's good to make those personal connections.
Yep.
Casey, you want to take the next question in the chat? I think it's biotech QA.
It was very strategic, Julia, the long question. Yes, so Tiffany is asking, when entering biotech QA, OC, QC positions with the latest layoffs, how do you navigate this? Would going through a recruitment agency be the best way to help navigate potential of picking a company where you might get laid off as a new hire? Just told that new employees are the first to go. How do you navigate that when you're transitioning into a field?
Wow.
I know there's a lot to unpack there. But definitely, we're facing a time where various industries are doing layoffs. So I understand where that concern is.
Yeah, I think in terms of the concern around the layoffs, I like you said, we're living in a time where I don't want to say it's inevitable, but it's very common. And, I would think about companies. There are companies that are notorious for laying off maybe every 6 months or every year or every quarter. And, if you do that research on the front end, maybe that's not a company you want to pursue if you know that, that company frequently lays off. So kind of think about, where you want to work and being strategic. If you're okay with, that possibility, then that's one thing. But if, you want something more stable, consider those companies that maybe aren't as prone to layoffs. And I think there was also a question around going through an agency versus the company. Mm-hmm. I think if you are trying to get your foot in the door, an agency might be an opportunity to go the contract or temp route. And often contractors and temporary employees are converted to full-time employees. So that might be an option. I don't know. Just my personal experience, I've always worked with the internal corporate recruiter. But I think, if you're trying to relaunch your career in IT or get your foot in the door, I think going to an agency is a good route. And also a lot of times companies and organizations will engage an external agency as a headhunter for a full-time role. And if they have gone, or in my experience, if we decide we're going to use an external agency, we are very much committed to filling that role. And working with an external agency, we sort of give high priority to those candidates that have come through. And so that's another option as well.
Great, thank you. And I just wanted to be cognizant of time. It's 1:23. I did just drop into the chat. There is a website called Glassdoor. I think it's glassdoor.com. And that is a website where people who work for an organization or have worked for the organization can go in and leave kind of reviews about pros and cons of working at a particular organization. You can also sometimes get kind of salary information about pay ranges and compensation benefits and those kinds of things. So that may be another additional area to do some research in, especially if you're interested in company culture and that kind of stuff. So let's see, I think we've got time for one more question. Julia, do you want to snag one off of our question sheet? I have lost track of where it is on my computer.
All right, stand by. Let me scroll to it. Let's see. Talking about digital portfolios, what sort of elements are you looking for in a candidate's portfolio?
Come on, Frida.
Well, our portfolios are an integral part of the process and the job search. Are they needed?
It depends on the type of role and the organization. I at RTI, I haven't worked on a lot of roles where it required a portfolio, but in other organizations where it may have been more of a creative type role, you definitely want to have your creative portfolio, or even if it's like graphic design, web design, something like that, you definitely want to be able to share that. Most of those portfolios now, I think, are digital, so you can easily add links in your resume to your portfolios. So if it's work like that you have, you've created a portfolio, most of those can be shared via a link, some kind of digital platform. So I would encourage them if they are required. Most recently, I haven't worked with a lot of roles that are requiring a portfolio of work.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that before we close out? Well, I want to thank you all for participating in this engaging, wonderful, and informative virtual panel about what IT recruiters look for in top candidates. I want to thank Tanya, Frida, Brian, Ellen, Dr. Ashton, and all the participants for joining us today. Like I said, the session is recorded and will be available for viewing at a later date. And any questions that were not addressed today, we will follow up with the panelists to get their answers, and I will roll it out to you in a frequently asked questions document. Thank you all very much for your participation. Have a fabulous, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.